All right. All right. Pat Divilly, we are live. What is happening, my man? I'm so glad you came on here. Um, this is one of those strange instances. Things have really got weird out there, but there's become a few beacons of hope. And I think it's become an opportunity for people to really to rise above it. I think in your first IGTV announcement, you balanced everything out. You explained how this is going to change things in this way, and it's an opportunity to do this. You're going to be at home, but now there's an opportunity. And you very much had this positive mindset, which I think is very contagious. And I think this is something we need to be hearing a lot more, because the other option, if you go into YouTube in trending, is coronavirus, people die, people die, people die, people die.
Yeah.
Prime Minister's sick, people die. That seems to be the main take-home message there. Before we get too much into that in how you've moved this, Pat, do you want to just, as a way of introduction, just tell us kind of how you got started on this journey? What is it you do now, and what did you used to do, and how did that start from humble beginnings?
Yeah, I grew up. Thanks for having me first. It's good to
Oh,
connect.
it's my pleasure.
It's a cool thing. I'm getting to connect with a lot of people with things slowing down now. So like we say, there's blessing and everything. Fitness was my passion since I was a kid. So it was kind of the first thing that gave me confidence. Grew up insecure and bullied quite a bit. And I think when I found the gym, it was like, this makes me feel good in myself. And so I decided at 12 or 13, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I guess for 12 and 13-year-olds growing up now, that's probably a possibility because they see all the people doing well in fitness. But obviously back then, I'm 32 now, so that's gone back 20 years. There wasn't an industry for fitness. I went to college, studied geography and economics, had no interest in that. But the one thing that kept me sane throughout that time was every summer I would go to the States and work in a cage fighting gym. So I was big into cage fighting at the time. That was like an alternate life. And seeing what was going on out in California and fighting out in California, it opened my eyes again to possibility with fitness coming home to Ireland. So I came back, finished my degree, did some personal training certificates, and then moved to England and did a master's in exercise and nutrition science. I feel like I'm giving you a long spiel here.
No, I like it. Keep it coming.
I came out of college at the worst of the recession, so kind of 2008, I suppose, the last recession that we had. And I was an entitled kid in retrospect. I mean, I was 22. I had a master's. The reason I did the master's was I thought there's a lot of personal trainers already. I want to stand out. And I think I came out of college thinking if you have a master's, you should be able to walk into a job. And obviously it wasn't the case when the recession hit. So I worked in a gym for a while up in Dublin, moved from Galway to Dublin, got fired from that gym pretty quickly because I was outspoken with my opinions. And I went out on my own. I was excited by the prospect of like going out and doing my own thing. And again, I've always had a lot of insecurity, and that's something I've really worked on the last couple of years, just building my self-esteem. But I always tried to build my self-esteem externally. And so when I moved from Galway to Dublin, the story in my head and the narrative in my head was, I wasn't even conscious of it at the time, but it was, I'm going to prove everyone wrong, and I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to be the man, and I'm going to make something happen. And so going out on my own in Dublin, I was like, right, now it's time to make it happen. And the reality was it was a lot more difficult than I anticipated. I didn't know anything about business. I didn't have any network. I didn't have any contacts. I didn't have any money. But I was too stubborn to come back. And so I spent 18 months just like struggling up there, working different jobs, not letting on to people at home that I was struggling, instead painting a picture of success on social media. And so ultimately the story goes, I came back on Christmas Eve with my tail between my legs. I cried for 3 hours on a bus back to Galway at 24 and just felt completely lost and felt all meaning and purpose in my life was gone. I felt like a failure. And I spent 6 months in a pretty dark place at home, moved back in with my family. I always say my brother was 11 at the time, had more money in the bank than me. Got to work in a pizza shop. Every day I was bumping into people that I grew up with that were sort of saying, Pat, I thought you were successful now. And that was like a kick in the teeth every day when your confidence is gone. But ultimately, I touched base with a guy in England who was running gyms, or a guy in Wales, sorry, that was running fitness sessions. And I just asked, could you give me some advice? And this guy said, I'll call you later today. And in my head, I thought this guy must be rich because he's ringing from Wales. That's how broke I was. And he didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. He just gave me some belief that I didn't have. And he said, go and teach outdoor classes, no rent. People will love it. Just bring the energy. And so I started teaching these outdoor classes. Started with 5 clients in my first morning. That completely changed my life. The idea that 5 people believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And we just built a culture down here in Galway of community through fitness. Within a year, we had 500 clients all around the place. We'd opened a gym and brought out my first book. And then over the next 5 years, I've had 25,000 online clients go through fitness courses. I did 2 more books. We raised $250,000 for charity. There was just a lot that happened in a short period of time. And ironically, I suppose when I had the most external success, or, you know, I just done the Late Late Show, which is a big deal in Ireland, obviously. I think that week I sort of knew in my heart, I don't like this anymore. It's not for me anymore, the fitness thing. And so I gave my gym to my friend, told him to change the name above the door and take over. And I went traveling and I suppose went off to find myself, or whatever you'd say. And that's still happening. But the last 4 or 5 years I've gotten into speaking, coaching. I'm a nerd for studying stuff. I hated school. I didn't think I was academic, but now I've found my passion, which is, you know, anything to do with personal development and personal acceptance. So breath work, you know, different types of therapy, counseling, coaching. Just did my yoga teacher training a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, that's kind of what I do now. I coach and I speak and I do podcasts, and yeah, I don't know what I do, but I enjoy what I do. And hopefully it makes an impact.
That is one of the most exciting things about the times we live in, is that there are these job descriptions that you couldn't make them tangible if you tried, but they exist. And there is a way for people to be these days doing the things they love. Like, for the first time ever, we can really make a career doing those things. I think what I found so interesting about your story, and what an incredible story it is, was, for me, listening to your TED Talk, was the change was, and this is going to sound funny, in a very similar vein, I came to London thinking same thing. I was like, only a matter of time before someone realizes the talent that I have, and I'll be big, you know? And what I realized through your story was that you changed your perspective. It seemed you went to Dublin to be a star, and then you realized you wanted to make other people stars. As in, you changed from serving yourself to then serving other people. And that has really been kind of your USP, is that you're not there for you to be famous. You're there to serve people as they come to go, hey, you know, you're doing great. Oh, you know, how much better are you doing than last week? And I think that is what you really got into people, you know, because you had been there yourself. You're like, oh my God, what that guy did to me, I'm passing on that buck. And then Mark Tregilda, I believe his name was, that the change a conversation can have. I think you realize then that there's a real power in touching people's lives if you can really access what it is that they need.
Yeah, look, it sounds cheesy when you tell people like that, if you change enough people's lives, you'll change your own. But it's just been my reality. I mean, I tried to become a well-known guy, and then I became, I guess, to some degree, a well-known guy through fitness. But none of that stuff ever gave me anything in terms of building my self-esteem. It only magnified my insecurities when I started making a name for myself down here, because I just had this imposter syndrome, thinking like people are going to find out what I know about myself, that I'm, you know, I'm insecure and I'm shy and I'm timid. And the irony of building an online business back then was I could hide behind a camera and put out this personality. And then when I built a following, I had to go to these events and people were like, you're kind of shy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm super insecure. But yeah, it's been the only thing that's fulfilled me. And it's Viktor Frankl wrote a great book, and I think it's a good one for people to tap into right now with Man's Search for. Yeah, it's the first thing that came to mind when this whole thing happened was, this is our crisis where we have to find meaning in the suffering. But I'm studying a diploma in that type of therapy at the moment, and they talk about that. A lot of us are experiencing existential vacuum, which is like where we feel emptiness despite all the material things. And the only way to find meaning and purpose in life, which is the most important thing in life, is meaning and purpose, is self-transcendence, which is going beyond yourself and trying to help other people. So it's selfish on my part. Like, I'm just going to go, and my mentality when I was in fitness, I would always tell my client, I'm going to give you everything over the next 2 months, and then you can go and you can just do this for the rest of your life. Like, I don't need a business model where I keep you forever. Like, I'm not thinking in terms of business. Same thing with the Instagram stuff at the moment. I'm like, I'm just going to give away all my stuff for the next couple of months. I don't really care. Enough people will come and do stuff with me to keep me moving. But that also encourages me to keep learning and keep growing and keep developing. I'm not going to hoard my stuff because it's not my stuff. You know, everything we learn comes from someone else.
Yeah, there's no original ideas, especially in fitness now. That I sometimes think about this. I think we're running the biggest Ponzi scheme ever. You know, it's more information. You kind of get it, and then you pass it on, and then it goes down the chain, and it's great. And I'm the same as you. I want to, when people come to my class, I want to know something more than I used to know, or know extra move that I didn't know that I can teach you. And like, it keeps you honest like that, so that I can.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be new movements, but it can be new ways of thinking about that movement, you know, and the curriculum is infinite. And I think, you know, you as a jiu-jitsu guy, you know, the same thing, like there's a never ending curriculum. And that's exciting, especially as you get older, that there's things that are infinite because our lives are finite. So if we can find those things that are never ending, how exciting that we can just keep learning. We can keep getting this information and then passing it on.
Yeah, I mean, that mentality will change someone's life if they can take on that idea of like, there is no end point, because that's where a lot of suffering comes from, because people have this story of I'll be happy when, and it's I'll be happy when I have the house. And that's an end point. And as soon as you get the house, then you've got bills to come in. Like I always had these stories of like every level brings the different devils. So there's always going to be stress and struggle in life. And that's part of life. You just want new stresses and new struggles and new problems. That's the key. I remember thinking when I get on the Late Late Show, my whole life's going to change and everything's going to be perfect. And then I drove back to Galway with my parents in the car afterwards, and I read through thousands of nice tweets. And then I started getting some people say, he's got no charisma. This guy's, what the fuck is this guy doing on the telly? And I was like, oh, there's the new problem. Like new levels, new devils. Like it didn't fix everything. So if people could let go of the idea that like, I'll be happy when, and just start being happy every day. And that doesn't mean your life's going to be perfect, but what I try to do with all the personal development stuff is really ground it, because, you know, sometimes we see the big motivational gurus and it just seems larger than life and it doesn't seem tangible. And so when I say, right, let's be happy every day, it's not that your day is going to be perfect, and positive thinking is not that your day is going to be perfect. We're all going to have stress and struggle for the next 6 months and beyond, with recession, with changes, and with uncertainty. But you've got choice over like what you do in the day. So simple thing I get people to do in the morning is, today I'm excited for fill in the blank. And if there's nothing to be excited about in your life, don't be surprised if you feel a bit down. So put it in there. And then the second part, which ties in with what you're saying about like growing and sharing, is the two spiritual needs, I suppose, are growth and contribution. Tony talks about this, Tony Robbins. Growth and contribution. You'll never have fulfillment if you're not growing and you're not contributing, because everything in nature does that or it dies. So like everything in the ecosystem. And so, you know, I asked those two questions in the evening. How did I grow today? And who did I positively impact? And that ticks those two boxes. So I've got excitement by identifying in the morning what I want to do in the day. I've got growth, I've got contributions. Who did I positively impact today? You know, you consciously have to think about that. And you're like, okay, well, maybe I didn't, you know, I'm not just going to write down something for the sake of it. I'm really going to think. And if I didn't positively impact someone today, it's just an awareness, like do it tomorrow. How did I grow today? I read a couple of chapters of a book. Okay, I feel good. Keep doing it.
Now, this is what's interesting about this time, right? This, if ever there was a time to learn an instrument, a language, a sport, to nail your double unders, your muscle ups. Yes, boy, there he is. As you see, I picked mine up for the first time in like 3 years. I started playing guitar again. I was like, I forgot the joy that can come from these things. And that's one of the things you said in your ITTV thing, was we're going to slow down and become human again. And you're like, wow, here's all these things I had access to before, and I just felt like there was no time. There's the same hours in the day. You know, weirdly, I'm working more now. I'm teaching more classes than I was before. Yet, I'm making more time. You know, I'm making more time to do things and structure my day, which is very exciting. I also have this like stick, this bow staff. Again, it's a weapon from martial arts I haven't done in ages. I picked it up this week, and I just wanted to see what happens from Monday to Friday. And you realize little changes day by day are big changes week, month, year. But it's been able to.
Is that from Cali? Is that from Cali?
No, not Cali, not the screamer sticks. I mean, those, we used to do a bit of that too. We used to love that. But this is like one solid long stick, which you spin around. Super fun, except like yesterday was a little bit windy. So I got hit like, I don't know, 24 times. I got a lump in the back of my head from hitting myself. I was like, ah,
You don't
but
want to go to hospital for that right now.
yeah, exactly. I'm staying away. But you spoke about it there for a second, and there's so many good things to touch on there. But I want to pick your brain because it's something I struggle with in terms of I'm just trying to get these two ideas. The idea between positive thinking and I guess the tension with being a realist. So both of
Yeah.
us came to another country or another city and thought, wow, exciting. I'm going to be the biggest star ever. Where is that balance between positive thinking and then also being realistic?
Yeah, look, a couple of ways to sum that up in my experience at least was my biggest problem in Dublin was I wanted to get to 100 clients before I had one client. So I was living in the future, like way off. So I have no clients. I see everyone around me has 100 clients. I want 100 clients. And this massive leap is terrifying. Like, you know, it's great to be positive, but how do you go from 0 to 100? You don't unless you start thinking about, well, I get my first client and I blow them away, and then I get 2, and then I get 3, and then I get 4. So I think you have the target, you have the goal, you work backwards, you break it down to the little step you can take. You know, public speaking was my biggest fear a couple of years ago, terrified. And I set out to do 100 talks in a year, and I did 88 free talks just to get comfortable. And people ask now about getting into speaking, and I say, well, that's what I did. And they say, okay, I'm going to do that as well. And then I contact them a month later, and they'll say, oh yeah, I did my first one, but only 5 people showed up, so I didn't do any more. And I'm like, that's the process. You have to like do the talks with 5 people and 6 people and 7 people, and it doesn't just. And so what I'm getting at with that is positive thinking is epic and it's great and everything else, but you got to be, the realistic side of it is, to get what you want, you have to do what's required. And that's what people forget sometimes is, you will be out, like I've been out of balance the last couple of years when I've been growing this like business at times, and I've let things slip and I've let things slide, and I've made mistakes in the background with people in my life and all that kind of stuff. So the sacrifice with everything, and I think you have to be clear on like, is the sacrifice worthwhile for what I want? Because what I find is if someone says I want to make this change, like people are all the time, Pat, I want to like do this, and I'm like, okay, what are you willing to do? And the immediate response out of everyone's mouth is, I'm willing to do anything. And it's like, no, you're not, because you'd be there already. In the same way that I'm not willing to do anything I'd be speaking all over America right now if I was willing to do anything that was required to be a world famous speaker, but I'm not. And so I think if you can be honest with yourself and say, this is what I want, this is what I'm willing to do, and do those things match up? Because if they don't, you just need to pull back a little bit on what the target is. There's no point in me saying I want a 6-pack in the next 12 weeks if I'm not willing to work out more than twice a week. I'm not willing to change my nutrition. And so I adapt the target. So, you know, on positive thinking, I'll tell people, identify what you want and then recognize all the ways that could go wrong. Like all the ways you're going to mess up in the next 12 weeks trying to get to your goal. And people say, well, that's not positive thinking. I'm like, that is positive thinking. That's recognize the obstacles before they get in your way and then come up with strategies to tackle them. So if someone wants to start yoga with you for the next 12 weeks or go on the app for the next 12 weeks, and they're like, I'm going to do 4 yoga sessions a week. The typical thing is, I'm motivated. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. But I've never been so motivated. And I'm like, that motivation is going to disappear when you're tired and when you're stressed and when your willpower fades. So you need to have a strategy. When motivation disappears, I do Y. When this happens, I do X. When this happens, I do. The more prepared you are for the worst, the better things will go, if that makes sense.
Totally. And that's something that comes up in visualization too. Often people talk about visualization done wrong in the sense that people visualize just the perfect run, the perfect throw, whatever it is. And they say, it's not going to be like that. And then you're going to be putting pressure on yourself for it to match up to this unrealistic expectation. What you should be saying is feel exactly how it is, something that you've felt before. And then also think about what happens when it's not going your way. When you're down 20 points with 30 minutes to go, what then? You know, prepare for those situations too.
I had a couple of weeks ago, there was a kid on to me, he was 14, 15, he was a rugby player, and he had a trial the next day for Leinster. So like it was big. I mean, this is his dream in life. He wants to be a rugby player, under 16s, or I'm not sure what the age group was. And he rang me up and he could hear anxiety and panic in his voice. And he basically said to me, my coach has told me if I miss any tackles, like that's game over for me. Like, what do I do? I'm so nervous. I'm so terrified. And I sent him back voice messages and I said, look, here's the deal. Rather than thinking about not missing any tackles, we're going to think about what do you do when you miss your first tackle, because that's where the wheels come off. Like if you watch any sports game, Every athlete makes mistakes. Serena Williams hits the net. I don't know, Conor McGregor gets hit. Like, all these athletes make the same mistakes as the non-elite athletes, but the difference is the resilience, and resilience is the ability to bounce back. So I had this kid have a mantra in his mind, and his mantra was big hits, like big tackles, big hits. That's what he's good at. So I said, you're going to wrap your wrists with tape, and you're going to write big hits on your wrists. And then when you miss a tackle, you're going to look down at your wrists and you're going to remember big hits, big hits, big hits, because that's our focus, as opposed to getting caught up. Most people, when they make a mistake in life, all they think about is the mistake. Like, they're doing a public speaking event, they stumble over the words, and then they're like, oh, they get caught in that. So you have to remember where you're going. It's like, there's no point looking in the rear view mirror if you're trying to go forward.
Which leads us quite nicely onto being present and meditation. This idea of thinking about the mistake and causing future mistakes. My first driving test, I did I don't know what you guys call it. It's kind of like parallel parking, but it's alley docking. And I actually had hit the cone, but he didn't see it. And then I went off to do the next part, which I was fine at. I've always nailed that. It was like the hill start, no problem. But I was still thinking, I was like, yeah, that's so amazing. I didn't get failed for that. Sure enough, rolled back on the hill start, failed the test. Not for the thing that I actually did, but because I was so distracted. And that is it's so the thing that happens with us. We get caught up in replaying these things over and over again that gives us anxiety. So again, I feel like there's tension, and something I've always wondered about. How do we deal with being in the present moment, but also make plans for the future? This is a tough thing. I often think, like, the reason me and you are talking over something as incredible technologically wise as this is because someone could sit down and plan and look to the future and go, oh, technology could go this way. But then what is the problem with that, and where does it become pathological?
Yeah, so a couple of things I think are useful. One of the reasons we don't live in the present is because, as you say, we're focused on the past and we're stuck in the past. And so I encourage people, I'm all about journaling. Like, that's my thing, is get pen and paper and make the unconscious conscious, as Carl Jung used to say. So Carl Jung's thing was, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll run your life and you'll call it fate. In other words, there's programs running in the background that I'm not even aware of that are affecting my relationships and affecting my health and affecting my habits. And so with pen and paper, I can become aware of those things. So in terms of becoming more present, something I find useful is going back to my past, identifying triggers or stressful situations, and finding the negatives, and then looking for all the positives that came from those negatives. And equally, I could look back to the future. Sorry, hopefully this will make sense. So I'll look back to my past and something, let's say I'm bullied in the workplace. Okay, so I was bullied in a previous workplace. And so I moved to a different workplace and I was bullied there again. And this has been a recurring cycle. And I just replay this in my head all day, every day. And so I go into a new job now, and obviously the story in my head is people don't like me and I get bullied. And so I'm living in that story rather than being with the people in front of me. And so I act in accordance to that story. So as difficult as it is, sometimes I go back and I'll say, right, what were all the positives that came from me being bullied in the workplace? And the immediate response from people will be, there was no positives, but there's absolutely positives. I might say my family rallied around me. I saw who my real friends were. It got me out of an office where there was toxic people. It allowed me a new opportunity. I had a bit of time off work to think about my next move. Okay, there was some positives there. That starts to neutralize a negative charge from the past. And then on the flip side of that, I'd say, what did I want? Because if I'm not happy with what I got in the past, there was a mirror as to what I wanted. So if I was bullied in school and I resent that, I only resent it because I wanted to be popular. And so I'll go to that and I'll say, what would the drawbacks have been if I was popular in school? I wouldn't have met genuine friends. I probably would have started drinking and smoking when I was a kid and would have been a mess up. Wouldn't have got to college, wouldn't have got to be a fitness guy. I'm like, wow, everything has worked out exactly as it's supposed to work out for me to be here. And when I neutralize these two things, I find the drawbacks with my fantasies from the past, and I find my positives with the negatives in the past. That makes me more present because I'm not, supercharged by that stuff. People that live in their heads, what's the word? Compulsively live in their heads. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, there's that. There's also even the act of journaling takes some of the madness up here and puts it on paper. The big thing, I've said it in some of those recent videos because it's really stuck in my head recently, is we've 60,000 thoughts a day and 98% of those thoughts are the same as yesterday. And so how can we create something new? So people will say, I'm thinking about something. And more often than not, that thinking is not thinking, it's remembering. And when you take out pen and paper, you're thinking. Like the person who invented Zoom was thinking. They weren't remembering because, and again, the thinking process is really just about asking new questions. That's why conversations with other people are impactful and empowering. That's why coaching is impactful and empowering. But people forget they can do that with themselves. And people need to do that for the next 6 months, in my opinion. It's like, you have to have a level of acceptance and say the next 6 months, everything's going to change. Like everything's going to change. How do I proactively embrace that and dance with that rather than fight that, and brainstorm with that, and then the other last thing that I think ties in with what you kind of asked was, how do we creatively think about the future and work towards something in the future rather than being, frantic and overwhelmed and busy. I think creating space is huge. Obviously, that's what yoga allows people to do. But the example I give sometimes is, if I was to ask you your goals, Doug, and give you 5 minutes with pen and paper, most of the stuff you'll write down is either there in the background, or it's from your past, or it's based on what you see around you. So it's in your head, it's in the past, or it's what you see around you. If I leave you with the same pen and paper for 30 minutes, your heart is going to bring up some stuff that will be your real goals, like the creative stuff. It's not intellectually based. It's like intuition or whatever you would call it. Because I found that a couple of years ago, like, okay, I bought a house. What's my next goal? Let's buy a second house. It's like, that's such a stupid, for me, that was a stupid goal. It's like, there was no thinking to that. And then when I sat with pen and paper for half an hour, I was like, what's my real goals? I want to improve the relationship with my family. I want to go back to jiu-jitsu. I started thinking from an authentic place rather than a intellectual, heady place.
No, it's such good points for all of those things. Yeah, it's a tough time in terms of being present. And what I'm getting from you there, certainly how I feel about meditation, is that it's almost like we've been living with this person our entire lives and spent no time with them, because we spend all our time doing stuff and being reactive. I think that is the addiction of being busy, is that I don't have to spend time with myself to think about these things. I can just watch this, do that, do this, practice this, and I never actually sit and think, like, what is it I want to do? I think a lot of us will blindly go somewhere we don't want, then sit down and face the fact we're on the wrong road. Like, that is far scarier. You would rather just be like, oh, let's just keep going. We've come this far, even though it's the wrong way. Let's just take this to the end. And the terrifying thing, I guess, is this is your life. This is.
Yeah. Someone, I don't know where this, I think maybe Sharon Salzberg, is that her name?
The meditation girl.
Meditation. I think she had someone had the quote that said something like, meditation without compassion is anxiety, or something like that. And so my experience with the meditation, like, I'm not by any means an expert. I've just been doing a couple of years now, breathwork and meditation. But really what I'm trying to do this year for myself is just get comfortable with whatever my feelings and my thoughts are, and slow down. So as you say, like, for me, I was an overachiever in my 20s, and that all stemmed from a lack of worthiness on my part. Like, I didn't think I mattered. I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I'd ever meet my dad's expectations. There was all these different things like that were driving me. And now, becoming aware of that completely changed my life, because I slowed down a bit. And I still get caught in that sometimes. Like, I get caught in needing to be significant and needing people to like me but my thing the last couple of months has been like, loneliness has been something that comes up for me. And so I sit and I meditate, and I feel this like loneliness, or I feel some sort of rejection, or I feel these things. And what I'm trying to play with this year is like, okay, if I feel lonely and I go for a night out, or I turn on the telly, or I do a lot of work, when the work disappears and I'm still lonely, like, I haven't figured that out in any way. So there's nothing wrong with me being lonely. That's okay. Let's get curious about this and not beat yourself up about the fact that you have certain feelings and have certain thoughts. Because if I sit with it for long enough, like, I'm like, why would I be lonely? Well, maybe you don't prioritize meditation enough. So you don't know yourself enough. So you haven't worked on that relationship enough. So, maybe that's something. And then you'll just start like figuring it out, like become a problem solver. Okay, I feel rejected. Why do I feel rejected? Well, when I was younger, I was bullied. Okay, what was the story I told myself at that time because I was bullied? Told myself I'm not good enough. Okay, how long in your life have you carried this story? And I start becoming aware and aware and aware and aware. And then I can start to change my patterns. I'd be telling people, sit with yourself for 10 minutes. And if something comes up, just become curious. Don't feel the need to change it. Don't feel the need to um, run away from it. Don't think there's something wrong. Just almost step outside of yourself and be like, what's going on in the body? Like, okay, there's some tension there. There's some overwhelm there. Why am I overwhelmed? Well, you've just worked 80 hours for the last 4 weeks.
Mm.
Okay, maybe the overwhelm is not a bad thing. Maybe that's just a sign. Slow down. Like your body's giving you signals all the time, but we choose not to listen.
Mm. It's the idea, I guess, of becoming your own therapist and dissociating from it for a second, having that space to think and to talk things through and to rationalize things, which can only happen if you dissociate from the feeling, or like you say, get curious about the feeling. And also, I think people don't appreciate when it gets to that level of meditation, you actually have to be quite brave to take these things on, to sit with them, like you said, to notice them. For me, there's this idea that the world is this rich opera of things happening. And we've put the labels on which one of those things are good and bad. And we want to go towards the good and we want to avoid the bad, instead of going, man, these are just experiences. And it's a rich tapestry that is life. And you're going to miss so much of it if you're only chasing half of those experiences, which you've deemed as good. Missing a loved one that's died is sad, but I wouldn't want to not do it because I want to experience that. I want to feel that. And somehow I feel connected to my dad who passed by missing him. I don't want to just shake off that feeling. I want to experience it. I want to feel it. It's not for us, I think, to always run away from these things, but like you say, to rather sit with them, experience them, feel them. And that's what part of being alive is. It's being sad and happy, not just one.
Yeah, and this the polarity thing, right? You don't know what happy is until you've been sad. You don't know what up is until you've been down. You don't like you need those. You need that, and then the Stoic philosophy is just to kind of like just go through it all and just again almost try to step back. So another thing I think is really useful for people, I'm trying to do more of it myself, is like talk therapy of some kind, and that could be just talking to a bunch of friends or just having like be a willingness to be vulnerable and to. One of the things we all struggle with is shame to some degree. Like we just we've been shamed when we're kids for doing the wrong thing, or as adults for doing the wrong thing, or mistakes we've made, or we always compare ourselves to what we see externally. So everyone around me looks like they've got a perfect life and they're incredibly noble and they're in integrity all the time. And then I know what it's like to be me. And I'm like, there's moments where I completely fall off the wagon and I do this and I do this. And I carry this shame. And there's two types of shame. There's healthy shame, there's toxic shame. And toxic shame is where I never verbalize it and I just carry it inside me and I berate myself for it. And healthy shame is where I make a mistake and I talk about it with someone I can trust, and that gives me a new boundary where I'm like, okay, you messed that, like you did that and you hurt someone, and let's not do that again. That's a healthy shame. Like that's necessary. But toxic shame, again, I'm doing a lot of men's work now, like trying to bring groups of men together, and we're getting on calls and we're just expressing what's going on. And it's been there's something powerful in like saying something out loud. Like pen and paper is powerful, but saying something out loud is more powerful again. So you physically see people cry when they express their dreams or their struggles for the first time, is because they're trapped inside, and there's nothing wrong with letting a few tears go. That's
It's an interesting landscape for men at the moment. I think things are certainly changing. I have a lot of sympathy for men out there at the moment, though. I feel like we get it from all angles now. Like amongst men, we might feel like we're not man enough. And from society, we've been told we're too manly. So we're stuck between this rock and this hard place. I'm not sure if certainly people on the extreme feminist side have appreciated what hard position we've been put in like that. It's really tough, a lot of what we've been told just that we are is not good. And I certainly wince at seeing certain adverts come up and certain narratives come through media, whether it be in movies or news stories, that I think as men are killing themselves in record numbers, probably now is not a great time to be telling them the pieces of shit, in my opinion.
Yeah, like it shouldn't be this us versus them thing. It's like we're all another. One of the things I've kind of like been doing some reading on the men's stuff recently. It's been interesting to me to look at like the lack of what's the word, initiation of going from boy to man. So like females start having their menstrual cycle, and it's a clear clear change. And men, generations ago, we would have been raised by our father, and you'd stand beside him when you were out fishing and you were doing this and you were doing that and doing the other. And then our fathers during the Industrial Revolution start going to work, and now you're raised primarily by your mother, and maybe you don't learn what it means to be, a fully embodied man that has all the different traits, that has the feminine side and the masculine side. But I'm only getting into that stuff. But for me, I'm just trying to facilitate conversations where people feel comfortable and feel supported and feel, I'm lucky in that the fitness business I grew a couple of years ago gives me some level of credibility to talk about the importance of feelings and emotions and stuff. Whereas I think a lot of the men that are coming to my seminars, if I was just a guy talking about his feelings and emotions and didn't have a business background, maybe it'd be a bit more difficult for them to hear it, because the story would be, well, it's fine for you to say that, you're sat under a tree meditating, you don't know anything about the real world.
Yeah, you've been there,
yeah.
lived it. Yeah, that's great that you're doing that, and I hope to see more of that stuff and more guys. I've tried for the longest time to try get guys into meditation as well as onto my retreats or yoga. It's a hard sell. It's just a hard sell. And I think it takes time. Cultures take time to change, but you're obviously doing a great job talking to people. One of those things, as we touched on, was through Instagram TV currently. As you started that, did you start that just in the wake of the coronavirus kind of shutdown?
Yeah, I decided to film a video. It was funny, I had some hesitations because most of my content has been filmed at talks, and it's like nice professional content that videographers do for me. And then just pulled out the camera and I said, right, let's share a few thoughts. And look, I experienced the self-doubt and the worry. Not worry is not the word. I experienced the self-doubt that everyone does. And then I'm like, who am I to be talking about what to do in a coronavirus? But then the flip side of that is, look, I know about uncertainty more than anyone, because, I mix my life up all the time, and I jump into crazy scenarios all the time, and find myself more often than not asking, what am I doing here? Whether it's, doing the yoga teacher training or up on a mountain or, so I just thought, let's, the podcast goes down well. So I thought I'd share some ideas. And then I just know the value of journaling and meditation. I know it's completely transformative. Again, I want to give people their first steps into something, because, I just want to make stuff accessible to people. The thought of going to a meditation retreat might be a big step for people, but maybe 10 minutes a day could be a starting point. And it's got some good feedback. And then I just decided, look, let's do a 14-day free challenge. And what it's given me again is purpose, because, no more than anyone else, I've lost 95% of my work for the next 3-4 months. I've refunded hundreds of people that were due to be at seminars. All my corporate work is cancelled. Everything's gone. And so it will be easy for me to feel sorry for myself and just stay in bed all day or drink wine all day or whatever, and I thought, this will give me a sense of purpose. This will make me feel like I'm making a difference. This will give me a reason to get up in the morning and post these videos. So it's done as much for me as anyone, and that's always the way it is.
Could you give us some of the things in the challenge? I've gone through them, but could you just elaborate on what some of those things were in the challenge that you were trying to get people to instill in their day?
Yeah. So simply put, like, there's meditative practice, then there's a journaling prompt every day. And we started the meditation with the box breath, which is the most simple probably form for me, at least, of giving people a form of breathing that just settles them a little bit. So I put it real simple. Most of us are in fight or flight response or panic response a lot of the time. Cortisol, adrenaline running through our bodies as if we're being chased by a tiger. That comes from our thoughts. It comes from our environment. It comes from our stresses. It comes from social media. It comes from notifications. It comes from everywhere, every angle. And so if you don't have a strategy to get out of that, you're playing the hoping game, and hope doesn't get you anywhere. You've got to have a practical strategy to go from fight or flight to rest and digest, to tell your body relaxed. So simply put, 4-second breath in through your nose, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, and a 4-second hold. That's a box breath. So 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. You know more about this stuff than me, I'm sure. 5-minute timer, and just go with that. And that's the meditative practice for week 1. Easy. And the person who says it's too easy, if you're not doing it, you're either doing it or you're not doing it. Sometimes I've made that mistake so many times where I sign up to something, I'm like, oh, I already know that. And then after breath, and I'm like, Pat, if you're not doing it, you don't know it. You're just like, you're being a philosopher, not a practitioner. The journaling prompts, a couple of things, really, again, simple stuff. I encourage in the morning, 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 priorities for the day. I think 3 priorities for the day is more important now than ever. If your job is out, if you're back home, if you're a little bit, if you don't have any structure to your day right now, which a lot of us don't, it's important to put a bit of structure in there, because that just gives you discipline, it gives you meaning, gives you purpose. So what 3 things would you like to get done in the day? Other prompts, there's been a bunch of them. We've done stuff around core values. Who are the people you admire, and what are the traits that they demonstrate? And that'll give you a bit of a compass as to when you live at your best life. Really good. Actually, this is probably the big one that I would encourage people to look at. A lot of us rely on motivation. And as I say, I could sign up to the app or sign up for classes with you or come to a retreat and say, I'm motivated, let's go and do this. And maybe struggle to stay consistent, and then fall off the wagon and come back to you a couple of months later and say, right, let's go again. I'm more motivated this time. There's this reliance on motivation. What we forget about is reflection. So one of the journaling prompts encourages people to look over the last 12 months and identify your 3 biggest wins and your 3 biggest disappointments. Again, non-judgmental. What were 3 really big wins for me in the last 12 months? What were 3 disappointments? Disappointments could be relationships that fell apart. It could be decisions you did or didn't make. It could be habits that you were going to put in place that you didn't follow through on. It could be any number of things. And what you're going to do is reflect upon those. So when I look at my wins, what were the things that made me successful in those areas? So maybe it was that I had a coach, I had accountability, it was in my calendar, I had a clear plan. I'll really start to see a recipe. There's a recipe there. When I succeed, these things happen. And then on the flip side, what were my disappointments? And what was the recipe here? Took on too much, didn't have support, didn't make it a priority, didn't have a plan, all this kind of stuff. And then I can start tying the 2 together. So I'm like, okay, I wasn't consistent in this area of my life. I did really well in this area. I'll take some of these. So I'll get accountability. I'll get this. We can learn so much through reflection. But again, that requires pressing pause and looking back before you look forward. And it's sexier to set a goal than it is to look at why you failed with your last goal.
Of course. Now, goal setting is something that you like to do. Is that something that you always look at? I mean, one of the coolest things I saw with goal setting was the alternative. So the idea that you say, this is the goal, this is where I want to reach, this is the thing I want to do. And that's great to have. Like you say, that's good. And you create this heaven for yourself to be like, this could be amazing. Yeah. The same thing, what you do is you set the hell and you say, if I don't make a change, what does my life look like? And I thought that was so good. Again, it's that idea of, it's great that positive thinking is the thing that everyone wants to go to because it feels nice. But that's that same thing about being realistic. And then again, about goal setting, but also having the alternative in mind to go, well, not only should I do this, I need to do this because I don't want my life to look like that.
Yeah. So in NLP, there's a process called the Dickens process, and that's effectively what we're doing there. So everything we do in life is either driven by wanting to move toward pleasure or wanting to move away from pain. So if I am afraid to go and ask a girl out, it's because I associate more pain with her saying no to me than pleasure with her saying yes. That's just an association I've got in my head. And so we're more driven by the need to avoid pain. We'll play it safe. And you see this across the board, someone that hates their job, but the thought of leaving it and being uncertain is more painful than the pleasure that will come with doing something new. Probably the best example of this, if you see someone that's very heavy and has never trained before, and they force themselves to go to the gym for 6 months, there's a tipping point where suddenly the thought of missing the gym becomes more painful than the thought of going to the gym, because they lose a little bit of weight, they build a bit of confidence, they start getting compliments, and now the association changes. The gym is no longer painful. Putting back on the weight is now painful. And so if we can paint those 2 pictures. So for me, journaling, meditation add a lot to my life, but like anything else, they're easy to do, they're easy not to do. And I can't be arsed some days. But the association I have now is that when I don't journal and I don't meditate, anxiety is not too far away from me. Like anxiety will spark for me in the couple of days after not journaling and meditating. And so that's an association I've made where it just makes it easier. On that pain and pleasure, I mean, someone wants to stop smoking, as an example, if they're a chain smoker. If the goal is pleasure-based if I stop smoking, I'll save some money and, I'll be able to run without coughing, and they're looking at pleasure, that's one driving force. But if you go the flip side and you say, right, what would happen if you don't stop smoking 5 years from now? It could be that you're dead. It could be that you can't run around with your kids or your grandkids. It could be that your family are in hospital with you, sat around your bed looking at you. And that's extreme examples, but Dickens' process is really about bringing you to that point where you're like, oh no, I do not want to.
So as we're talking through all of this, Pat, I'm struck by how knowledgeable you are about these things. Did you study NLP? Did you study, mindfulness, stuff like that? Or was it just been your own readings? Can you just fill us in? Like, if someone wanted, like, I'm inspired listening to you, where could I find out more? Should I do a course or should I just do my own readings? What's the case?
Yeah, initially I was a fitness background, did a master's in exercise and nutrition science. And then when I switched into this stuff, I've done life and business coaching. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy and counseling diplomas, logotherapy diplomas, NLP, gone to all the main guys. The books have been the main thing. I'm just reading books, listening to podcasts. I'll be honest, and this is like painful to admit to some degree, but part of the reason I do some of the diplomas and stuff is just to have a piece of paper. And I know that's kind of ego based, and that's
well, yes and no, Pat. I think I'm the same. I'm more interested in the information. I want the information. I couldn't really care if they give me a diploma or not, but people do care. We're still stuck in this world where it's not enough that you know. People want to see something, even if that thing they know is fraudulent. It's a mad world we live in. So I don't hold it against you at all for having the diplomas, but that's very interesting. Would you say that the courses were useful though?
Yeah, look, I pick up something from every course because I'm looking, and my mentality is I spend thousands, like I spend most of my money that I earn on education just because it's just my passion. It gives me energy. It excites me. It inspires me. When I stop, I go through phases. Like there was my 20s, I was studying so much that I recognized that every second word out of my mouth was someone else's. And I think that was when the journaling came in, because I went to a course actually, and he had us write in a journal for 9 days. And I felt cheated because I said, I've paid a lot of money to be here and he's making me do the writing. He's making me write about it. But I learned so much about myself that the penny kind of dropped, that you have to take the stuff you're learning and then get a journal. And the way I encourage people to read, if they're reading personal development, it's different if you're reading Harry Potter, Roald Dahl, that kind of stuff. Like that's for entertainment and for fun. But if you're reading personal development book, the book's everywhere here. But if I read the book and I get to page 3 and there's great insight and I think, wow, that's great, that's really cool, and I keep reading and I don't do anything with the insight, was it really worth it? Can I just put a sticky in the page, close the book, take out the journal and say, well, the book suggested that you list 10 things that you're grateful for. Okay, I'm going to get my journal, I'm going to do that, and then I go back to the book. So it's kind of insight integration. But yeah, look, I'm blessed in that the work that I do is like, it's my passion. And so it's twofold for everything. Everything I study helps me heal myself, and it helps me, and that's language I wouldn't have used even a year ago. Healing. I just thought I'm developing myself, but it is healing. It's letting go of the stories you have about why you're not good enough. But everything I try to teach, as quick as I learn something, I try to teach it to someone else. Just so that's probably the best way of learning is, from.
I would agree. So are there any online courses that you would suggest in particular? Any books? What are your big hitters that you say, listen to this? Let's make it easy. The podcast you think you should listen to, the book you should read, and the guy you should follow, including your own books, by the way. Feel free to throw them in there, by all means. I know you're a humble man.
You know what? There's just been so many little pieces. I would listen. My podcast is a good kind of all around personal developments that will introduce people to lots of different ideas. I wouldn't recommend any of my books in particular. They're fine, but I mean, my podcast is good. My books are okay. In terms of books, there's so many. Right now, I'm reading a lot of stuff around nonviolent communication, which is really, really good way of communicating. And it kind of goes back to what you said about we're all seeking good or bad, right? So we all like trying to do the good thing and avoid the bad thing. And so because we're in that judgment-based way of living, when I say something to you as a criticism, well, most things I say to you will come across as a criticism or praise. It'll be one of the two. And we get really defensive. And so nonviolent communication is more about, I'll tell you that this is what I saw happen. So I saw that we were due to go for lunch and you turned up late. That's my observation. And the feeling that gave me was I felt a bit, um, I felt, trying to think, because they'll say in the book, we don't have a very good vocabulary for how we feel.
I
A
see.
lot of the a lot of the time we'll say things like, I feel like you let me down. And that's not a feeling, that's a thought, right?
Mm,
I feel like you let me down. That's a thought. So it might be, I felt neglected. I felt abandoned.
mm.
Okay. So you'll observe what happened. You'll state your feeling. Then you will say, what's the need that's not being met for me? So you're becoming curious as to what's the need. The need that's not being met is, he's not supporting me. Okay, so that's the unmet need. And then you'll make a request. I'm not explaining it too well there, but it's
I kind of understand. I see, because I know this so well. It's what makes discussing things so difficult when there's something, especially someone close to you, you need to discuss, and you might not even be coming from a bad place, but you find yourself in the situation where you're like, oh God, I've got no idea how to say this that doesn't sound like I'm being a dick. Like it's really hard, and that's text messages. 100%. I don't deal with anything of any importance via text ever,
yeah,
because it's just
biggest,
it's too easy. It's too easy to get that wrong. I think there's some nonverbal cues. Face to face is always the best. You can see the mannerisms. You can see what's happening on their face. If not voice, you can also hear intonation, and intonation is like another level of communication. So I can understand how this book would be very useful, and hard to explain because it's very hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and the guy, he's passed away since, Marshall Rosenberg. So he's the guy that's like, he was an intermediary between countries that will be at war. So he's like conflict negotiation strategist. But yeah, the four pieces: observe what happened, so you don't attribute what the other person did or what they didn't do. You just observe through your eyes. Here's what happened. Here's how I felt. Here's what the need that was not being met, and here's my request. And it's a request as opposed to a demand. So that's interesting. But my podcast for personal development, Nonviolent Communications, is a good book. My favorite book ever is a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. That's incredible. Awareness, Anthony DeMello. He was a Jesuit priest who spoke Eastern philosophy. When he died, the church didn't know what to do with him. He's incredible. He's up on YouTube. Died in 86. Really witty guy, and his whole thing was awareness. So again, just observing your patterns and not living like I don't know, not living in reaction. And then online course, no, you know what, just read Awareness. Just that'd be my
Nice. Because I feel like now is the time to be doing this kind of stuff. Everyone has that thing in the background. They go like, I've always wanted the time just to get on with that thing. And now is definitely the time to do that thing.
This is a course on shadow work. This is a course on
shadow, as in Carl Jung's shadow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's been really interesting, because it's funny, like the personal development, the goal setting stuff is easy, right? Like it's easy to do that. It's easy to set your goals, be inspired. It's not easy to get your goals, but easy to set your goals. The hard stuff is the shadow stuff, where you're like looking at the stuff you don't want to look at, but that's where the real juice is. This is a course on flow state. It's a course on inner child therapy.
Oh my God. It's just, I thought you had furniture in there. You don't. You've just got chairs made out of books and courses.
Motivational interviewing.
Oh man. So how much do you read a day then, Pat?
You know what, like this has fallen at the right time for me. December, I was in Thailand for the month, so I didn't do any reading for teacher training. January, I was on the road. I did 21 seminars, so I wasn't home. February, I went to Kilimanjaro with the group for 2 weeks, so I was in Africa. And then I had 10 more seminars when I came home. So this has come at the perfect time. I'm all good being cooped up in the house. Yeah. I'm an introvert. I go through, at the moment, I'm probably studying 8 or 10 hours a day at the moment, but I'm in that zone. And again, I was the guy that was not academic in school. I still don't particularly feel academic, but it's almost a gift. It's like, I think I was talking to Kevin Boyle about this. the things that you're not good at, that you really have to learn, you tend to be a better teacher at those things, because
Mm.
someone who's a natural will find it hard to verbalize. So
That's so true.
I
I had
didn't,
sorry, go on.
sorry, no, I didn't have a lot of confidence growing up. I would say communication was something that I still need to work on. And so as I figure out the intricacies of these things and I struggle with implementing them, it's all for the means of teaching long term. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Now, Pat, you're a super generous guy, even to be on here with me. But I am aware of your time, so I don't want to keep you too long. But I do want to say, there's probably a moment now where, for many people listening, it'll be there going to the beach to do their first class, where 5 people turn up. That moment must be there. A lot of people going live, and maybe not that many people showing up. What, just some advice, some broad stroke advice for people that are starting out that journey? I've had some teachers say to me, they're like, I really want to go online, but I'm kind of scared. What if I mess up live? What kind of advice would you give to people that are maybe getting started or trying to find their way, their niche in now?
Yeah, a couple of things. So the first is, there's a quote that I put in one of my books, and it's the best decision in life you can make is the right decision. The second best decision you can make is the wrong decision. And the worst decision you can make is no decision. So
Amazing.
don't live in no decision. Don't live in waiting for, this is what's happened with this whole coronavirus, is it's shaking us up in that we have no choice now but to like make some changes. And that's empowering and liberating for some people, and it's terrifying for other people. So I think if you don't make decisions for your own life, eventually something happens in life that forces you into having to make decisions. If I don't decide to get fit and healthy, I'll eventually end up in the doctors with him telling me that I've gotten too sick and things are not good. So I would say make a decision. Second thing is, stop comparing yourself. And this is like a broad stroke. It's not like as easy as, well, it is as easy as what I'm going to say, but it doesn't seem as easy as I'm going to say. Only compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Stop comparing yourself to other people. When I was in Dublin, I was comparing myself to the people with 100 clients. I had no clients. If I compared myself to the guy with no clients and I could get one client, I'm a step ahead, and that's where confidence and momentum comes from. So if you're a little bit better at anything than you were yesterday, you're rocking and rolling. And then enjoy every step of the journey. And if you had told me that back in the day, I would have said, oh, it's easy for you to say. You're at step number 12. I'm at step number 1. It's not fun at this step. But I found when I had 5 clients, I was able to give them all the attention in the world and really connect with them and really be there for them. And I had no stresses, and I had a lot of free time. I had no money either, but I had loads of free time. And then 3 months later, I had 100 clients. And now I'm writing dozens of meal plans. I don't have a minute. I don't get to connect with them on the same level as individuals. So there's different levels, different devils. So okay, I've got money now, but I can't connect with these people the same way. I wish I could be. This is something we'll all be cognizant of this. When we're in school, we all say, I can't wait to finish school. Like, I'm sick of it. Like, I'm so fed up. It's going to be great when I can finish school. And then you finish school and you've got some other stresses in your life. You say, I wish I was back in school. There was no stress back then. And so we live between nostalgia of how things were and fantasy of how things are going to be. And if you can recognize that, you again sort of come back to the present. You're like, yeah, I just need to kind of make my mind up on how I handle this. So don't compare yourself to other people. Make decisions, take actions. Stop living in the future and the past with nostalgia and fantasy, because the future is not going to be perfect. The past was not perfect. The past was not horrible, and the future is not going to be horrible. It all balances out. It's just a case of perspective. I think that's it. I think that's it. Yeah, yeah. And look, the last thing is probably, not tough love, but like, be honest with yourself. Like, what do you want and what are you willing to do? And don't live in delusion. Again, there's loads of things I would like in life. I'd like to have a 6-pack year round, but I'm not willing to do what's required. Like, that's one of my things. I would like to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu already, but I'm not willing to do what's required. There's loads of stuff I'd like to have. But I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm not going to shame myself because I don't do all those things, and I should. I'm not going to blame other people or environment. I'm just going to be like, oh, it is what it is. That's like how it works. You put one thing into the machine, something else comes out. So what are my inputs? What are my outputs? And allow yourself that kind of 100% responsibility. Take the power back.
Pat.
As Rage Against the Machine would say.
Thank you so much, man. That's so much good advice. I mean, I'm sure there's even more knowledge that people would love to have from you. Can you tell them where they can see more of you, your handle, your website, your books, and your podcast? Just hit them up with those names so they can find more of you.
Thank you. PatDivilly.com, so Divilly. And then I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. I'm a podcast, the Pat Divilly Podcast. And I usually do tours and workshops, but I don't know when the next ones are going to be as things stand. But look, when it happens, it happens. And I appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for all of this stuff. You've definitely inspired me to get on to the learning and more studying, something I used to love doing. And then next time we can have a little competition on the guitar. We'll see how we're getting along with that. Maybe a duet. We'll make it not a competition, a duet. Let's work together, make beautiful music together, Pat. Thanks very much, mate. And we'll catch up with you soon. Cheers, buddy.